This cartoonishly red meat is one of the most popular items at the Michelin Guide's Best Barbecue in California, Heritage BBQ. And that's not only because of its spectacular color, but also because of a secret ingredient Heritage customers can't get enough of. So how do I know this? Well, I spent a week at Heritage learning about all things barbecue and how Heritage has been so incredibly successful. And today, I'm sharing with you everything I learned. And I'm kicking off with one of the most important ingredients that makes the bright red char siu pork belly so incredibly addicting. And I have that ingredient right here. This is Chinese 5-spice. The recipe's on your screen so that you can make your own at home. And I have a recipe that uses this spice blend that will knock your friends and family socks off. I call this shoto rub. Combine 1 tablespoon of Chinese 5-spice, 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of onion salt, 1 tablespoon of granulated garlic, 2 teaspoons of ginger powder, 1 tablespoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of white pepper, and 2 teaspoons of mushroom powder. This is a fairly versatile rub that's great on both chicken and pork, but for those who have never had 5-spice, it's kind of a trippy experience. Because of the Szechuan peppercorns and the other aromatic spices in it, the flavor starts out spicy, then it gets kind of sweet, smoky, minty, and cool, and then it kind of numbs your tongue. So if that seems too intense for you, here's a quick trick on how you can mellow out the flavor a little bit. So I'm cooking up a pork butt, and before I put on the 16 mesh pepper and the shoto rub, I'm gonna use fat as a binder. Specifically, this high quality Graza olive oil. And even more specifically, this is Graza Sizzle. It's an extra virgin cooking oil made from mature mid-season olives that yields a nice, mellow flavor. It has such a smooth and clean taste, and that's because Graza is a single origin olive oil, meaning it's made pure from one specific Spanish olive called the picual. My wife and I love Graza, so much so that we got this new bottle less than a week ago, and I'm already down to less than half. But thankfully, Graza makes these refill cans, which first of all are cool because I don't have to buy a new bottle every time I run out. But the even cooler thing about these cans is that they're nitrogen sealed, which keeps oxygen out and locks the freshness in. Along with Sizzle, Graza also makes Drizzle, which I'm gonna talk about in just a little bit, but first, I'm gonna finish cooking this pork butt. Pork went on the smoker at 225 degrees Fahrenheit. At an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, I wrapped it in foil with a half cup of honey. Once probed tender, I shred it, poured in the melted honey from the wrap, touched it up with a little more of that shoto rub, and then drizzled it with Drizzle, Graza's extra virgin finishing oil. Made with olives picked early when the flavor is the boldest. It's the perfect aromatic complement to my 5-spice pulled pork. You gotta try this recipe. If you want the best tasting olive oil on the market, then make sure you click the link in my description or scan the QR code on your screen right now. And make sure you use code ANT10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Thank you, Graza, for sponsoring this video. Moving on to the next tip, let's talk about the peak protein of Texas barbecue, the brisket. Now, brisket is by far the hardest cut of meat to barbecue because first of all, it's made of 2 muscles that cook very differently. And secondly, because every step of smoking a brisket is critical to the final product. And one of these very first steps is the trim, which is arguably the most important step because if you mess up on the trim, you pretty much ruin any chance of cooking a decent brisket. And honestly, trimming was one of my least favorite parts of cooking a brisket because I was so terrible at it. A few months before I got to Heritage, I spent a couple of days with Jeremy Yoder, Mad Scientist Barbecue. We were cooking for a catering event I was helping him out with, and when we got to the trim, not only was I absolutely terrible, scalping every brisket that I got my hands on, but I was also slow as mud. By the time Jeremy trimmed 15 briskets, I had only done 5, and I also got crippling back pain. Well, fast forward to today, and no joke, I love trimming briskets, and everything changed for me after learning from the best at Heritage BBQ. So this is Lennon. A master butcher who worked for years at a prestigious whole animal butcher shop called Electric City Butcher. And as soon as I saw him in action, my jaw just about hit the floor. He got through trimming and seasoning all of the ribs, chicken, sausage, brisket, and pork butts in like 5 hours. And I took special care in taking note of how he expertly and efficiently trimmed the briskets. And from my observations, I made an easy 3-step trimming guide that I use to get perfect briskets every time I cook. So step 1 is the decal, which is the hard fat and tissue that connects the 2 muscles of the brisket together. And as such, it's actually on both sides of the brisket. On the lean side, it's this white hunk of fat on the top of the brisket. You can't miss it. Just shave it down a bit so it lays flat. Then flip the brisket to the fat cap. The other side of the decal is this hump of meat sticking up. Also very hard to miss. Just cut this off. This piece of meat is called the mohawk. And the guys at Heritage actually trim these, throw them on the smoker, and use them for the chopped sandwiches and tacos. The mohawk is part of the point of the brisket, also called the fatty, so it can be one of the best parts of the brisket if it's cooked properly. So mohawks are really small, which is why I call them brisket juniors. So if you just throw them on your pit alongside with your brisket to cook, they can get pretty dry and tough. But a quick and fail-proof recipe is just cook them like Leroy and Lewis cooks their beef cheeks. Cook your mohawks at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 to 5 hours until the crust is fully set and barky. Then put them in a small container with beef tallow, lard, or whatever fat you want to confit with. Then continue to cook for 3 to 4 more hours until they're super tender and enjoy. The next step of the trim is the fat cap. Trim the fat down to about 1/4 of an inch thickness. And just trim the opposite side of where the mohawk was, not the mohawk side. Because 99% of the time, the mohawk side is already at 1/4 of an inch thickness after you remove the mohawk and also that little hunk of fat underneath the mohawk. Do not forget about that part. A trick I learned from Lennon is to cut the side of the brisket along the edge to expose the meat. That way you can actually visually see where the fat cap ends and the meat begins. The last step is shaping the brisket. Just cut the sides to even it out and round out the edges to give it that classic, nice oval shape, just like this. And that's all there is to it. Now this is absolutely the most important thing I learned while I was at Heritage, and I am dead serious because it prevented me from making the biggest mistake of my life. So one of the days I was at Heritage on one early morning before the lunch service began, one of the pit cooks called off. And this is a massive problem, okay? And by no means is that a knock on Chris, one of the pit masters at Heritage who was cooking that day, because that guy gets down in the pit room, all right? He is a fantastic cook. But on the days of service, not only do you need someone to man the 4,000-gallon offset smoker simultaneously, but you also need someone to sear the tri-tips and fill in the gaps to make sure everything is ready for service at 11 o'clock. One man can't do it all, and unfortunately, Chris is only one man. So on this specific day, the executive chef at Heritage, Nick, and also the chef de cuisine were both out because they were cooking for an event off-site. So Morgan, the sous chef, was in charge of the kitchen that day. Without missing a beat, Morgan came outside and seared the tri-tips at 10:30 a.m., joking and smiling with me and Chris while the line was growing for the 11 o'clock open. And not only did he get all of the tri-tips done, but he made it in time to run the service when the doors opened, and he never lost his smile. And I noticed that everyone was this way. From Morgan to Lennon, Chris to Danny, the owner of Heritage. Everyone was so happy and willing to help each other, whether it was the middle of the lunch rush or if we were just outside smoking meat in the cool California evening. And I figured out the genius of how Danny was able to find these amazing people to be on staff at Heritage. So question, what do a former gangster, a fine dining chef, and an anime-loving master butcher have in common? Well, on the surface, absolutely nothing. But if you look a little deeper, their commonality is that every day that Heritage BBQ opens its doors, Their shared goal is that every customer will have a mind-blowing experience. They have a collective dream that Heritage BBQ will become the best restaurant in California.
So good.
And this is the lesson that I learned. If you're going to take your barbecue passion to the next level, whether you're catering or doing pop-ups or opening a restaurant, the biggest mistake that you can make is teaming up with your friends and family just because they're your friends and family. Now, I have seen some fantastic examples of friends and family barbecue joints killing it, like Goldie's Barbecue, Bar A Barbecue, Redbird Barbecue, just to name a few. But it works for them because everyone is on the same page, fighting for this same dream like Heritage BBQ does. At the end of the day, you can't hold your friends and family hostage to your dreams if they're not their dreams. So if you're looking for people to team up with to either grow or start your barbecue business, I'll show you how to network and make connections with skilled and passionate barbecue lovers all over the world. Just click the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you guys over there.